All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to The Explainer, where today we're tackling a concept that has probably influenced you way more than you even realize. Honestly, chances are high that you've organized your entire training philosophy, your career path, or maybe even your kid's weekend schedule around a magic number from a massive 2008 bestseller. You know the one, 10,000 hours. It's the golden rule that says, if you just put in the time, mastery is absolutely guaranteed. But what if I told you that the actual researcher, the guy whose study produced that famous number, spent the rest of his life desperately trying to explain that it was just an average and definitely not a magical threshold? Well, today we're going to look closely at what the science actually says. And trust me on this, the real data is far more fascinating than the myth.
So be honest for a second. Have you ever quietly done the math on your own hours? Maybe you track your time practicing the guitar, your reps on the basketball court, or your late nights coding. You land on a specific number, and you likely feel one of two ways about it. Either you're completely reassured, or you're just utterly crushed. Either you're well past the 10,000-hour mark and quietly wondering why you aren't a world-renowned expert yet, or you're nowhere near it and wondering if there's even any point in continuing. We literally build everything around this number. Training plans, youth academy selections, our personal identities. But the crazy part? That underlying threshold was never actually in the research to begin with.
The man whose research produced the 10,000-hour rule spent the rest of his career saying it was not his rule. I really want to let that sink in. The father of this data actively objected to the rule, publicly, for years. Since then, the scientific field has actually gone back to measure exactly how much of our performance this underlying variable really accounts for. And the results? Well, it's a lot less than the popular story implies. And as we're about to see, it changes dramatically depending on exactly what it is you're trying to master.
Part 1. The 10,000-hour myth. Let's trace exactly where this whole thing started.
Okay, so back in 1993, researchers Anders Ericsson, Ralph Kramp, and Clemens Teschromer published a study in the Psychological Review. They looked at violinists at a music academy over in Berlin. And they found that the very best group of violinists had accumulated, on average, around 10,000 hours of solitary practice by age 20. Fast forward to 2008, and Malcolm Gladwell's incredibly popular book took that specific average and turned it into the rigid 10,000-hour rule that we all know today. And this is exactly where the translation went completely off the rails. You see, Ericsson's objection to the mainstream rule was very specific, and he repeated it a lot. First off, 10,000 was simply an average for a group. It was not a bar that each individual had cleared. In fact, roughly half of the elite violinists were actually below the 10,000-hour mark. Second, we have to look at the definitions. Gladwell counted hours of playing generally, which included just being on stage performing in front of audiences. But Ericsson meant something much, much narrower. He was talking about deliberate practice. This means individualized training tasks, explicitly selected by a supervising teacher with a clear performance goal and immediate informative feedback. Just playing around? Yeah, that doesn't count.
Part 2. What the data actually says about measuring practice.
To finally put this debate to rest, the field started doing some heavy measuring. In 2014, a massive meta-analysis by McNamara, Hambrick, and Oswald was published in Psychological Science, encompassing a staggering 11,135 participants. They looked at 88 studies, covering 157 effect sizes and 111 independent samples. Their goal was to answer a really simple question. How much of the variance in performance does accumulated deliberate practice actually explain?
When you break down how these numbers shake out across different fields, the results are mind-blowing. Practice explained 26% of performance variance in games, 21% in music, 18% in sports, just 4% in education, and less than 1% for professions. Overall, deliberate practice accounted for only about 12% of the variance in performance. So the researchers' conclusion was super clear. Deliberate practice is absolutely important, for sure, but it is simply not as important as the popular myth has argued.
Let's drill down into sports for a second. A 2016 follow-up pooled 34 studies with nearly 3,000 participants just to look specifically at athletics. Deliberate practice accounted for 18% of the variance in sports performance overall. Among sub-elite athletes, it was 19%. But look at that elite level. Among the best of the best, deliberate practice accounted for just 1% of the variance. Talk about a shocking case of diminishing returns. When you get to the very top, everyone is putting in the hours. The researchers also noted that athletes who reached a high level hadn't even started their sport earlier in childhood than the lower-skill athletes.
And if we needed a final nail in the volume argument, McNamara and Mitra went back to the original 1993 study design in 2019, this time published in Royal Society Open Science. They used 39 violinists, a super clean double-blind procedure, and way better statistics. They found that accumulated practice explained just 26% of the variance in group membership, compared to the 48% claimed back in the original study. Ultimately, the best and the good violinists did not differ significantly in accumulated practice at all. The good violinists just had more hours than the least accomplished group.
Part 3. The Creator's Rebuttal. We've got to look at both sides honestly here.
In 2016, Ericsson published a commentary directly responding to that massive meta-analysis. He argued that they counted almost any sport-specific activity as deliberate practice, stuff like group sessions, watching games on TV, general play, and competition. By throwing all of that into the data, the study incorrectly assumed that every type of practice has an equal effect on performance. Ericsson argued that if you sum all hours indiscriminately, you totally ruin the ability to learn anything about which specific practice conditions actually matter. And honestly, we have to take both sides seriously here. The popular 10,000-hour claim is definitely not supported by data, but Ericsson hit the nail on the head with his defense. These meta-analytic percentages are best viewed as what you get from loosely counted hours. They represent a floor, not a ceiling, on what highly focused, well-designed practice can achieve.
So what exactly replaces the 10,000-hour rule? Well, the scientific community has largely moved to something called the multifactorial gene-environment interaction model. Set out by Ullin, Hambrick, and Mosing in 2016, this framework suggests that performance is driven by a massive web of contributing factors all interacting together. It's not just a single cause, it's genetics, it's environment, it's opportunity, and fascinatingly, even your psychological drive to practice is considered partly heritable. It's like a giant puzzle. Part 4. Your new action plan. Let's turn all this abstract science into some empowering, evidence-based training advice. All right, here are your 3 steps. Step 1, stop counting your total hours and start auditing your individual sessions. For a block of time to truly count, you need a specific target above your current level, immediate informative feedback, and a correction. Without those 3 things, you're just logging hours, not doing deliberate practice. Step 2, expect the returns to compress as you improve. Remember that 1% figure for elite performers? It's probably the most useful number we've talked about. At the top of any field, volume alone will not separate you from your peers because everyone around you already has the volume. And step 3, do not use this data as an excuse to quit. 18% of the variance in sports, for example, is still a massive share for a single factor that is largely in your hands. It just was never a countdown clock. I want to leave you with a challenge. Honestly reflect on this. Of your last 10 training hours, how many actually had a specific target above your current level and immediate corrective feedback? Think about it. If you appreciate getting the nuanced full-picture analysis on famous findings like this, make sure to hit subscribe. Rethink your next practice session, and I'll catch you next time.